The Aurora Memoirs by Thomas Michael, Chapter 4, The Split. We live in a kind of dark age, craftily lit with synthetic light, so that no one can tell how dark it has really gotten. Martin Prechtel, Secrets of the Talking Jaguar. Halfway through my 8th grade year, our family of 3 moved in with my father's business partner and his girlfriend, as we looked for our own place and to save money as growing economic stress and pressure began to set in. Within less than a year, the picturesque Midwest family dream came crumbling down in the wake of the rotten boards of unmet trauma that it was built on, that no one could really see on the surface. In this new city, I found myself without friends, my best friend or cousin and other family. No forests, a school of 2,500 kids, the largest in the state, at classes that were twice as hard. I quickly went from above a 4.0 to barely making it above failing grades, from teachers that loved me to ones that singled me out and put me down. A group of friends that would eventually become prom king and queen, to the lunch table that no one wanted to sit next to. Already feeling increasingly lost and alone, I was also coming home to a quickly destroying family, full of intense screaming arguments, emotional abuse, financial problems, all due to what was going on between my mother and father. From forests, friends, family, and farmland, to what was now a broken home. My father had quit drinking when I was around 2 years old and had been sober for about 14 years. The couple our family moved in with drank a lot. They loved to party. On his birthday, the year we arrived in the city, he tried to celebrate with some non-alcoholic beer. Within weeks, this turned into full-blown alcoholism again. He would try and hide it from us and everyone, drinking on the way home from work, and then lying about it. I could tell my mom was getting afraid, because she had known him before he quit. She recruited me to help her discern if he had been drinking or not. My 14-year-old self was forced into becoming a military-grade lie detector. Sometimes it was obvious, stumbling, slurring his words, blasting his favorite music over the speakers when he arrived home from work. Sometimes, when he would drink less, my ability to psychically and intuitively discern had to hone to a razor. But no matter how much or how little he would lie, gaslight, get me and my mother to try and question our own truth, sanity, and discernment. Simultaneously, this was some of the first times that he ever began to open up to me more deeply emotionally, making it even more challenging. The self-pity, the grief, the sadness that he held and locked away, as most all men still did at that time, before any real healing modalities had reached awareness and availability. My psychic and empathic nature had taken on many of the wounds in this phase, which fueled the growing split that I was starting to experience. These nights began to repeat more and more often, like a broken record. He would come home from work. He would maybe bring us a specialty Detroit pizza that we knew we loved, as he sat his signature soda down on the table that he used as a chaser. "What's up?" he might say, with a slight slur. My mother and I looking across the kitchen at one another. I would give her the look as I instantly knew, showing her, yeah, he drank again with my eyes. Her showing me a look of disappointment, but also disbelief, not wanting to accept the truth. "Let's eat," he might say, giving my mom the pizza to heat back up in the oven as he went into the living room to put on Cream or the Allman Brothers. He would begin to try and connect with me about music. Then I would play something that I had recently discovered. He would often bash it, saying it's not real music, due in its lack of one thing or another that the music he loved had, music which I also loved. For me, the technicality of it wasn't so important. This would turn into an argument, me calling out his drinking, finding the bottle hidden in the car, his denial, and then emotional breakdown. Rinse, cycle, repeat. His fear of loss, being alone, his lack of ability to face these things led to many things. Offering me money or buying me things out of guilt or fear mixed with love. Underlying it all, I could see many things. Him giving up his dreams, his own split, mixed with trying to be a good father and provide for his family. Being a slave to the broken systems of the world. The manipulation with money was part of him trying to ensure that I would stay dependent so as not to step up to take my mother out of the mess. The same ways the systems manipulated him. My mother's wounds manifested in other ways. As far as rites of passage go, subconsciously she also stifled my stepping into my own, her clinging to me for support, safety, trust. Just as for her, it was all too much for me. Born in the early 1940s, she had fears of getting a job due to the programming of her youth. She held tightly onto material things as her safety and comfort as well, making even more pressure on everything to try and live a lifestyle that was unsustainable. My mother loved me so dearly, unconditionally, just trying to love, give, and nurture me with everything in her power. Often the days after my father would drink and withdraw his financial support in anger, my mother might take me to the mall, buying me the various new things, clothing I wanted, treating me to lunch, processing her emotions with me, asking me what spiritual guidance that I may have been receiving in the books that I was into at the time. I could feel she looked into me as her spiritual guide. A teenage boy trying to find himself in a new type of world that he couldn't get his footing in, trying to protect his mother, but also bonding to her trauma in the process. In many ways, my parents pitted me against one another, trying to both reel me into their sides of things, their wounds, their plans, their pains. I often felt hopeless and powerless and caught in the middle. In these years, my parents both began to lose their own support systems as well. My mother losing her mother, the one who I also deeply learned from, the trees, the Celtic heritage. My father lost both his parents as well. This led me even deeper into trying to help them, and yet storing anger and grief as the child who needed them. So I took much of it on. I used to think to myself, would my father be drinking if he hadn't had to take on the pressures of having a child? Would my mother be free from all this if she didn't need to support me and take care of me? I began to numb and seek deeper answers for it all. I felt lost, confused, without anyone to turn to. But in some ways, God never left me through this initiation. I let the ember guide me through the longing, following its invisible threads. The things that continued to feel connected to home, that fueled the fire within my heart. The music and the threads that resonated from Castaneda, and even the discrepancies of the Bible. Some of the only things in this crumbling world of mine that felt like they made sense. As we finally moved into our own place across town as high school began, the trauma loop cycle more deeply set in. We moved in next door to a house with a family with older boys who regularly had parties. One day, they asked me if I could hide their drinks for the party in my house. If I did, I could come and hang out during the party. Feeling the excitement of making new friends group and being included, I did it for them. Later that night, I headed over with the drinks, and of course, I was the hero of the party. This quickly spiraled into me at this house or on my own, partying often. Not too long after, I would try smoking weed for the first time. I discovered new music, new culture, older friends in the in crowd, and begin taking on the necessary roles and identities that came along with it. My deeper, more personal shamanic initiations began to flourish in some ways with the advent of the internet. My parents had gotten their first desktop computer years ago. I can't forget when we finally got a laptop in our house for the first time with real internet. I felt like a kid in a candy store. I began doing searches online for topics I had no idea how to find books on. In these times, I finally found friends through music, school band, eventually bands with new best friends practicing out of my home. I tried to rectify this growing split in myself by seeking role models in music, diving into the biographies of musicians I loved. Jim Morrison's No One Here Gets Out Alive, Bob Marley's Catch a Fire, and Hendrix as well. As I looked into their lives, they too seemed to have this split. Morrison's wild Dionysian partying, his trips with peyote in the desert, bringing voice to these things through his music and poetry. Bob Marley's Rastafari traditions, uniting the people under love. The life of Jimi Hendrix, subtly hearkened of Aurora, as he spoke of seeing colors of the music as he composed them with synesthesia. These were the closest things I could find to people exploring both the realms of the shamanic, the psychedelic, the mystical, while also bringing these things into popular music, things that also connected with my friends. It was as if, through the books and the musical heroes, I was seeking the missing aspects of my father, and through the medicines, my mother. The laptop and the internet allowed me to follow these invisible threads and strings down two main paths. The plant medicines, the spiritual, their pioneers, but also conspiracy theories. I discovered Erowid, an online library of all things entheogenic, psychedelic, psychonautic, and philosophical. It led to a deeper curiosity in the power plants Carlos Castaneda spoke of, through pioneer writers like Terence McKenna, Alan Watts, Gordon Wasson, Martin Prechtel, even the first archives of Tibetan sutras and doctrine that were transcribed into English. As I read these authors, I remember feeling, wow, there are others like me, others who feel and see the things I see, others on this quest. I would listen and read for hours any chance I got, their audios, their books. By my sophomore and junior year, I was rotating partying and keeping up with my friends and social life, with being buried in books like Terence McKenna's The Invisible Landscape, outlining experiments on the I Ching and the end of time, while also chanting advanced Buddhist mantras in my head in between classes. Movies like The Matrix and researching the lyrics of Rage Against the Machine after discovering through them the soundtrack. The concept that this was all a simulation or an illusion spoke to some of the threads in the spiritual material, but also connected to something different as technology became a bigger part of my life. I began to research the band's lyrics. I remember reading them over thinking, wait, so there are people that don't trust the government? Having a father who had met the president and coming from a background of watching so many action movies, I found this striking. I began to comb the internet, researching the band, what they were involved in, which naturally led me down many deep rabbit holes. The darker side of these conspiracy theories also brought in a flavor of nihilism that was potentiated by the growing unmet trauma happening all around me, the fake self that I was adopting, and the city's disconnection from nature. A sort of virus that took hold in growing years and years to come. Some of these things my very closest friends in my band were into with me. But similar to the past, some parts were just too deep, too out there, and not cool enough. The speaking in tongues, the light language, I still had some books that I loved from the Way International we studied when I was young. Something in it still called to me. Sometimes I would speak in tongues as I felt it connected me to God in Aurora. A couple times I spoke with my friends about these things, but because of its Christian nature, it wasn't really cool enough. So I buried it to try and fit in. I can still remember the first time I really took psilocybin mushrooms. Some friends of mine and I decided to go out camping on some vacant land and one of my parents had owned. I can still remember the first time that I really took psilocybin mushrooms. Some friends of mine and I decided to go camping on some vacant land one of their parents owned, surrounded by forest. We arrived, setting up our camping spaces for the evening, and divided up our portions. Everyone had various things that they wanted to do as the onset began. I had brought my djembe hand drum and wanted to experiment with drumming and bringing myself into a shamanic trance state. I walked off into the trees with my drum, intuitively finding a place that felt right, far enough away from others that I wouldn't be bothered for a bit. I began to just breathe with the trees, with the drum, listening. As I began to feel the shifts and changes of the medicine, I started to move my hands intuitively, playing a fairly simple rhythm over and over. As I began to feel the shifts and changes from the medicine, I started to move my hands intuitively, playing a fairly simple rhythm over and over. As the rhythm and breathing brought me into a trance state, my heart began to feel the core of the earth. Syncing up with it, as I let the rhythm take over, it began to play itself. My consciousness was brought out of my body and down into the center of the earth, then immediately rocketing up from there through my body, out of the earth into the sun. This triggered my memories of consciously incarnating once again. My consciousness rode the light down towards the earth, but instead of coming up and back into my body, it hovered up above the earth. And yet part of me remained aware of being in my body. All in one moment, I began to see, sense, and feel myself, all humans, the planet, as one living organism, which we are all cells of, breathing as cells, moving as cells within this massive, intelligent creation. I began to come back into my body, into playing the drum. I sat in awe and wonder at what I had just witnessed. After being with it for some time, I walked back to try and explain it to my friends. They were also now very taken by the medicine. Most of them simply laughed due to the level of awestruck passion that I conveyed this experience with. Due to the rich depictions of the culture in Jack Kerouac's Desolation Angels and others, some part of me idolized California. It felt like it might be the one place on earth where who I was becoming could actually fit, where I could live the life I wanted. Later in high school, I got my first chance to go there with my two best friends and bandmates. We flew into San Francisco. We made our way up to Napa Valley to visit my bandmate's dad who had lived there. We took the drop-top convertible all up and down the coast, hiking Yosemite, taking LSD for the first time in the Redwoods, finally making it to Humboldt County. It was a counterculture heaven. I picked up my first copy of Dr. Evan Wentz's Tibetan Book of the Dead and also the Tao Te Ching, which for many years became my Bibles. We camped on Clam Beach just outside the city, as many of the hippies did. We drank some terrible wine my friend had saved from somewhere. As I sat there on the beach, I began to allow my awareness to sync up with the rhythms of the ocean. Again, like the mushroom experience, my consciousness began to drift, and a vision began to reveal itself before my inner eyes. I saw myself in the future, living in the forests and mountains of that area of Northern California, growing medicinal plants, living off the land. At that time, I had no idea what a prophetic vision this was. By the end of high school, music was like a full-time job for me. I had multiple bands, which was more like one band with many names depending on what style we played. We played shows around town, spoke of recording. However, since multiple band members had various plans to attend different universities, this wasn't really an option. Both guitar players and I wanted to go to Humboldt University, but only one of my friends got a free ride. In my heart, I wanted to take off for the Amazon to find a medicine man to apprentice with, or go to Tibet to become a monk. My parents said if I did that, they wouldn't financially support it. It was too dangerous. So I took the option of following my other best friend to college in northern Michigan. And this has been Chapter 4 of the Aurora Memoirs, The Split. If something in this chapter moved you or stirred a memory, maybe helped you name something that you've been carrying, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment on Substack or come find me on Instagram at Aurora_Thomas_Michael. The Aurora Memoirs lives first on Substack at theauroramemoirs.substack.com, where paid subscribers receive early access to each chapter, behind-the-scenes reflections, and the full written text to read alongside the audio. If this work has found you at the right moment, consider becoming a paid subscriber and helping me keep writing it. If you know someone who might need to hear this chapter, someone who grew up carrying too much, or who went looking for God in books and forests and medicine, share it with them. That's how this work finds the people it's meant for. Until next time, maybe I'll see you on the mountain.